Pacifica today. This is a city in San Mateo County, pretty close to Lucky Chances actually, and Pacifica in Spanish actually translates as the word peaceful, and it's a good word to describe this town, this area. And currently at Pacifica Brewery today, really great food, some good beverages out here. Come check this place out. Also a couple other spots that I'm not going to be able to make it to in Pacifica today, but there's a bakery called Mazzetti's, good stuff there, and a barbecue place, I think it's called Gorilla Barbecue. So good spots out here in Pacifica. All right, back to the usual 3-5 at Lucky Chances. First notable hand comes in 7-handed play. Hijack limps. I raise a 25 from the button with King Jack offsuit. Hijack makes the call, and we go heads up to a flop of Ace 10-8, 2 clubs and a diamond. Hijack check calls my bet of 25, and can't really explain it, but after he calls, it feels like he's got an ace as opposed to a 10 or a draw. So when the turn comes the ace of diamonds, I'm not going to continue the aggression after the hijack checks to me. The river, however, comes the queen of diamonds, so I make my hand. I'm unlikely to be up against the full house or backdoor diamonds, so when he checks, I go for value, $60. He goes in the tank for a while, assembles calling chips, and puts in the call. I table, and it's good. Next spot, middle position raises to 15, low jack and cutoff call. I'm in the small blind with King Jack of diamonds and 3-bet it to 105. Folds through the initial raiser in middle position, as well as the low jack. However, a 5-10 reg from the cutoff makes the call. Heads up to a flop of Ace Ace-7 rainbow. I decided against a 1/3 pot c-bet for unknown reasons, but if I had to give a reason, I was trying to mix my play against an aggressive opponent that does like to stab. He checks it back, and the turn comes a 9 of spades, so no help for my hand. I continue with the passive route post-flop and just check. This time hijack bets 150, and I actually think it's kind of close. Can check raise to rep an ace. Can call to bluff catch, although taking that approach may result in quite a few river spots that are going to be tough should I face additional aggression. My read on the situation is that the 9 hit my opponent, as I'd suspect that he continue with hands such as 7-9, 8-9, 9-10, and even Jack-9. And it's a bit early in the session to try to make a light call down, so I just let it go. Next hand on the gun raises to 20. I've got pocket 10s on the button. Can definitely mix between calling or raising. I opt for the former, and that brings in the big blind as well. 3 ways to a flop of Jack 8-4, 2 diamonds and a club. Both the big blind and under the gun raiser check to me. I just take the green light and bet 40, and that does the job. 5-handed straddle pot in this next one. Small blind calls. I'm in the big blind with ace queen offsuit and raise to 40. The straddler now decides to increase that price to 110. Small blind folds, and I've got a bit of an iffy decision. The straddler has another 400 back, so a jam could just take it down pre, and the worst case is that he calls and I get to fully realize my equity. Calling out of position isn't ideal, but it does allow me to underrepresent my hand a bit and potentially get it in good on ace high or queen high boards, assuming my opponent is raising hands such as ace 10 suited, king queen suited, and all combos of ace jack. All that in mind, I just make the call. Heads up to a flop of Jack 4-3 rainbow. So unfortunately I don't connect on this dry board and check. My opponent bets 120 with 280 back, and I just don't think it's enough to call and evaluate or make an all-in move. And this is one of the problems with taking passive action in this scenario. I find myself landing on this flop pretty much handcuffed, and I just let it go. The player later tells me that he had pocket 9s.
Anything?
Next spot, 7-handed. I raise 20 from under the gun with a couple of 6s, and I get calls from the low jack and the blinds. 4 ways to a flop of 9-5-5. Blinds check, and it's a decent flop for my hand, but it's fairly vulnerable. I decided to c-bet it for a larger amount, $60, to funnel their ranges to either clubs or a 9 that can continue, which then keeps the door open for me to leverage blank turn cards. The low jack calls, and the blinds fold. Heads up to a turn of an ace of clubs, so a pretty bad card as the front door flush comes in. I check, low jack bets 140, and for the reasons I mentioned on the flop approach, the turn here is just going to be a fold for me, unfortunately. The straddle is on in this next one. Hijack limps. I raise the 45 from the button with King Jack offsuit. The straddler and hijack call. 3 ways to a flop of ace 6-4 rainbow. Both players check to me, and I look to rep the ace and c-bet 60. I get calls from both players, so definitely a bit concerning. The turn comes a 6 of clubs, pairing the board. So great card, as now I'm less worried that either of the two players had flopped a set. Both players check to me, and sometimes it can be a scary spot to continue the aggression, especially when both players called the flop. That said, the turn has come in my favor. Sure, I've got fewer sixes than my opponents, but they shouldn't have that many sixes either. And betting here should make my hand look like ace king or ace queen, and definitely make it difficult for weaker aces to continue. I make it 240. The big blind tank folds, and the hijack pretty quickly folds as well. 2-1 so far this session with king jack. Alright, I think I was playing decent poker up to this point, and that's when this next hand develops, in which I think I lose my mind a bit. 7-handed, it's a straddle pot, hijack calls, cutoff raises to 50, button calls. I've got pocket sevens in the big blind and call as well. Straddler folds, hijack calls. 4 ways to a flop of 5-3-3. I decided donk lead here for 60. Kind of a weird play, but I feel in this spot, it gives me the opportunity to navigate to a win and gain more info on my opponent's holdings. Hijack calls, the initial raiser and the cutoff folds, and the button, who's a splashy player, calls. 3 ways to a turn of a jack of spades putting up backdoor spades. Doesn't change a whole lot. At this point I feel like I'm behind the hijack and ahead of the button. Kind of narrow in terms of what I'm putting them on, but it feels like hijack has pocket 8s and the button has a drawing hand such as 4-6. I continue the aggression for 125. Both players call again. And we go to a river of an ace of hearts, so now there's just one combo of ace-3 suited, but I try to continue repping a strong hand and use the ace as a scare card. I bet 315. Hijack reluctantly folds despite having around 180, and the button jams for 328. I unfortunately run into it here, but may as well call the additional 13 to see what he has. I put it in, and he tables 4 deuce offsuit for the rivered straight. Holy shit, this guy's got more range than Steph Curry. I like to bounce back in this next one with a small to medium pocket pair again. Pocket 5s this time from under the gun, and I raise to 20. Button and small blind call, and we go 3 ways to a flop of king, queen, queen. Small blind and I check. Button bets 35. Small blind calls, and for that price, I decided to gamble here and put in the call. And well, I hit a miracle on 4th Street as it comes to 5 of hearts, so I fill up. Action checks to the button, and unfortunately, he checks back. River comes the ace of diamonds. Small blind checks, and my line looks weird, but gotta go for value. I bet 150. The button goes into the tank and eventually calls. Small blind folds. I table and take this one down. Next hand under the gun posts. There's a raise to 20 from the hijack. The button and small blind call. I make a pretty risky play and just flat from the big blind with ace queen offsuit. Taking this hand multi-way out of position. Under the gun calls as well. And we go 5 ways to a flop of queen 10-5, 2 clubs and a heart. Good flop with top pair, and action checks through. Turn comes a 6 of hearts, putting up another flush draw. Small blind checks, and I'm going to put in a bet here, $75. The player on the button calls, and the small blind calls as well. Looking for a blank as we go 3 ways to a river. It comes better than a blank. It's a queen of spades. Small blind checks. I bet again this time, $250, hoping that someone has a queen or gets sticky with the 10. But both players fold, unfortunately. Nice to take it down, though. This next spot's pretty interesting. There's a straddle pot. I raised a 35 from under the gun with jack 9 of hearts. Big blind calls, and the straddler tosses in a single $100 chip. So typically throwing in 1 chip just signifies a call if you didn't announce a raise, but I'm not fully sure if that's in play when it's coming from the straddle. I decided to ask the floor for a ruling, and it is ruled a call. So we have 3 ways to a flop of ace queen 10, 2 hearts and a club. So great flop from my hand with up and down and the heart draw. Checks to me. I bet 50. And both pairs call. Turn comes the 8 of diamonds, so I make gin as I hit my disguise straight. Checks to me once more. I bet 200. The player in the big blind, who's the one that had the 4 deuce earlier, makes the call. Straddler folds. River comes the blank 5 of clubs, so really good card. He checks once more, and I'm just hoping he gets sticky. I go for a large value bet of 700. He goes in the tank for a very long while, and ultimately folds his hand. So good fold by him. This next one is also pretty interesting. Middle position raises to 25. Hijack and cutoff call. I've got a premium on the button, ace king of spades, and traditionally this is a 3-bet, but I decided to continue playing outside of typical construction given the various player considerations and just flat. Big blind calls as well. We go multi-way to a flop of ace 5-4, 2 diamonds on heart. Good flop, and when it checks to me, I bet 75. The initial raiser and middle position calls, and the action player and the hijack calls. We go to a turn of a 9 of hearts, putting up additional draws. Checks me once more, gonna keep going for value. 2-10, middle position folds, hijack calls, he's the same player that had the 4 deuce. And we go to a river of a 7 of hearts. Not the best card to go for more value, unfortunately, and when he checks, I check it back. He quickly tables ace deuce of hearts for the river nuts. Almost had this one, but another pot goes to the action player that I've been dueling with. I'm gonna buy an enema for the dealer, because that was a dirty backdoor. Alright, short-handed play in this next one. 4-handed, cutoff raises to 25. Button calls. I 3-bet it from the big blind to 105 with ace-king offsuit. Cutoff calls, and the button folds. Heads up to a flop of 8-8-6 rainbow. I choose to check, and he checks back. Turn comes a 3 of diamonds, putting up a flush draw. I check once again, and this time my opponent takes a stab for 125. I could have the best hand and just call, but given that I've got the ace of diamonds, it's slightly less likely that he's bluffing. Perhaps he has a hand such as ace-3 suited, or a small pair looking to deny. With that in mind, I try to make it difficult for those hands to continue and get to showdown, and I've still got aces and kings in my range that would play this way. I raise to 360. He goes in the tank for quite a while and ultimately releases his hand. Last notable hand, we're 4-handed again. There's a straddle. I raise to 35 with ace-7 of diamonds from the button. Small blind jams for 149. I call here. He tables king-9 offsuit, and the board runs out clean on the flop. It comes queen-jack-6, but the rest comes dirty. All right, got good news and bad news. Let's start with the good news. They've moved poker back indoors at Lucky Chances, so no longer have to freeze our asses outside. Bad news is that I got in the game for piles tonight, in for 1830. At my worst point, I was down around $1,000. Battled back a bit and ultimately cashed out $1,703. So happy with that overall result based on all the hands that I played tonight. Very swingy session. Got started at 11 in the evening, finished at 4. And just a really wacky session, as it has been at Lucky Chances recently. Do want to end things with some more positive though. Got to meet a few vlog watchers. Ricky from San Leandro, Jax, and Chris. He was the one that was giving a lot of action tonight and was great for the game. Shout out to all you guys. I appreciate you guys supporting the vlog as well as everybody else that watches these things. And with that, I'll see you on the next one.